In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Unreal Engine 4 and taking our models, our textures, and importing everything into the engine. And then we're also going to be taking a look at how to take a material and build a material and have everything show up correctly within the engine. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to a previous level, the third-person example map that we have. And this is kind of where we left off. So I'm just going to kind of drive in through here just a little bit. And the first thing I want to kind of tell you about is something that kind of is maybe playing a little bit of havoc for the way that the materials and textures look, at least from a value standpoint. So this scene has a post-process node in it, and I'm just doing a search for post. We can find the post-process volume that's in here. This is the default from the scene, what is made in here. Let's see here. If we basically take a look here, if we go to the post-process volume, you can see it's set to infinite, so it goes throughout the entire world. So that's been checked on. The other thing that is going on is there is a lighting difference. So if we go to show and we go to post-processing and we turn off this tone mapper, you can see that there is this shift in lighting and what's going on. It makes it a little bit lighter. So we're gonna go turn that back on, and then what we're gonna do is go to this auto exposure area. I think we talked about this earlier where we set the min and max brightness for this, but there is an exposure compensation, and right now it's set to 0. What I found is if I put this to 1.2, this will give me a much brighter value that is more consistent with what is going on in Substance Painter. Alright, now that we have that set, let's take a look at this other thing where we're going to build basically a folder structure that's got materials, meshes, and textures. Because I'm starting everything new and I want to show you all the different options that we've got for this, I'm just going to make a new folder under this crate area, and I'll call this class example, like this. Okay, so I'm going to go within here and I'm going to make some folders, and I'm going to make a meshes like this. We're going to make a textures folder, and we will make a folder for materials like that, and this will keep everything nice and organized for us. So let's go into meshes. We're going to go right click and we're going to import, and let's go ahead and navigate to where our FBX sits. So I've got my crate low.fbx, the same FBX that was used inside of Substance Painter, and I can select that and go ahead and hit open. Now when you do this, you're going to get some different options that you can kind of play around with. Some of the things that I think is kind of important is this combined meshes. If you've exported an FBX and you remember from like Maya, if you had multiple pieces like the top and the bottom of the crate, and you've exported that as one FBX, if you do not have this combined meshes on, whenever you uncheck that and you import in, it'll actually import the top of the crate and the bottom of the crate and give it a name for that. But we want this to be treated as just one object, so I'm just going to keep this as the combined meshes that you see here. It's going to say generate light map UVs, so it's going to take a look at the UVs that you have, make a new UV channel for you, and then take everything and make sure there's no overlapping UVs at that point. We've got normal. We can import normals, or you can tell it to compute normals, or you can tell it to import normals and tangents. So remember the FBX options that we used for tangents and binormals. If you want UE4 to compute all that, you would tell it to compute the normals on here, but we're just telling it to import the normals. The next thing I'm going to scroll down and kind of talk to you about is that there is this possibility for importing materials and textures. Sometimes that can be useful, but in this case we're going to build all that, so we're going to uncheck those, and then we're just going to click import, and we're going to import our crate. So we can double click on it and we can take a look at it, and we can see it in this window, and we've got all the normal controls that we would have for moving around. You can tap F, middle mouse, scroll, Alt, move around, and if you hold down L, you can click and drag the light around on here. Now there's only one material that was actually assigned to this box inside of Maya, and so you can see that we've got this material slot within here. If we assign multiple materials on here, we'd see two different materials show up and two different slots that would be available for that. So that's just something to keep in mind. Also, we can turn on our UVs and take a look at the UVs that were imported in. So here's the UVs that were imported in, and it took those UVs and it relayed it out as a new UV channel for the light map. So you can see it gave a nice amount of bleed and space around everything and made a new UV channel for us. So we can go ahead and click none for that. There are other options that we can take a look at for taking a look at different methods of viewing information within here. I'm not going to go into that too much. I think that's probably going to be enough for what we need just for taking a look and kind of viewing the object and seeing the options that we have here. So I'm going to go ahead and click save for this. The next thing we're going to do is go to materials. We're going to right click. We're going to say new material right here, and just go ahead and click this, and we're going to call this m_crate and call this class example like this. We can take this material and we can click and drag it directly into this material slot, and now that material will actually be assigned to this. Let's go ahead and hit save for that. We'll double click the material and open up this in the material graph, so you can always see these in these tabbed versions, and we can go back and forth between looking at maybe what the crate looks like and then looking at what the material looks like as well. We can also do this. We can take our meshes and we can go here and we can click and we can drag out a copy into the world, and we can see immediately some of the changes that we're kind of making. So we can keep this in the world like this, and we keep these two tabs so we can kind of bounce back and forth between that. Next thing we're going to do is go to the textures area. We're going to right click and we're going to import, and we're going to find the different textures that we've made. So I kicked those out in the substance export folder that we made. So we'll go ahead and click this first one, hold down shift, and then select the rest of them and hit open, and we can import these all at the same time. Now it's going to recognize that you've got a normal map, and it's going to automatically do a conversion for you on this, so it'll actually tell you about that. We'll go ahead and hit OK for that. Let's double click and take a look at all the different textures. So color map should come in, and then you should leave this as sRGB. The normal map, it should be checked off. That's going to make it linear in the color space. Now these packed maps that we have, we should not have sRGB turned on, so we'll turn that off for this one. And we also have packed maps for this one as well, so we'll uncheck that. And then you can see this little asterisk indicates that we need to save our files. So let's go to here and just save each one of the files. It might take just a little bit depending on the file size that you got, but this should go fairly quick. And we'll click on the last one for the color here and hit save for that. And we'll go back to our material, and we can take these textures, just do a selection here, hold down shift, grab those, and then click and drag right into this area and then let go. And what it's going to do is load up our textures for us. We can take our texture sample. We've got red, green, and blue, and we can use those channels individually if we wanted to, or we could pipe out alpha. So we could pull this all into base color. This is red, green, and blue all together. So if we pipe this into base color, just like this, you can see what we're going to get. We're going to get the texture to show up on there. If I hit save, it should update that material. If you remember, we took the material and we assigned it to the actual crate itself, so that's why we're going to see this start to update in the world. The other thing that's kind of neat is that if we use this option for this little teapot icon here, if we take our mesh, select it, and then click the teapot, we can actually load the mesh that we want to apply our material to, and we can view that directly in this area here. So I do notice that there is quite a bit of a difference between what's going on value-wise in the material editor. If we go to the lit, there's this exposure, and we can turn off auto exposure, and we could drag this down to maybe -1. I'm going to do -1.2, somewhere in that area, and I think we're getting a closer match between what we see inside of here versus what's going on inside of the world. The next thing I'm going to do is take the normal map, and I'm going to pipe this out into the normal area right here, and this will put the normal map information on there, and you can see that gets a little bit more dimensionality to that. If we hit save for this, we can see that change be pushed out into the world, and it'll take just a little bit to kind of calculate that. And I think I'm going to just tap the space bar and rotate my object just a little bit, so we can see it kind of a little bit closer in the world to what we see in the material graph editor. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag these down just a little bit, and we've got our packed maps that we've got. So if we select it, remember we've got the occlusion, roughness, and metallic. So we can go from the red channel to ambient occlusion. We've got the green channel should be our roughness, and we'll drag this up to roughness, and then metallic should be blue, so we'll drag this here, and we'll go ahead and hit save after we've done that, just like that, and we can see the changes pushed into the world at that point, just like this. So we'll go ahead and hit save. Now what I want to show you is just a little bit about being able to take some of the options that we have, and we're going to build some very simple controls into our material to where we can fine-tune this on the fly. So currently metallic is a 0 to 1 value, and what we could do is if we did a multiply node, so if we right click and say mult, we can get to the multiply node, or you can hold down M and just click and drag that. So we're using the green channel on this, and you can see we're going to go to metallic for this. So we can take this green channel, put it into the B slot, and then we can hold down S and click once, and this will give us a parameter node. The other thing we can do is hold down 1 and click, and this would give us this, and we can right click on here and say convert to parameter. What these are going to let us do is name these parts, and then when we make a material instance later, it'll let us show up for these options that we can actually change on the fly. So I'm going to call this metallic. Metallic mult, like this. Since we're multiplying, if we do a value of 1, if you multiply something by 1, it'll give you the same exact result. So we can do that, and we can ensure that we're not changing anything, but we've just given ourselves some kind of control for being able to manipulate that. Now the other thing for roughness, so if we wanted on roughness, we could do a multiply on that as well, or we could do an add. If you did an add node takes something and it adds brightness to something. So I'm going to take the blue channel and plug it into the blue right here, just like this. Let's see, we wanted, this is supposed to be roughness is the green channel. So I actually need this to go from blue. This is the metallic multiply. Sorry about that. And then green, I'm just going to make sure I'm keeping this correct. We got roughness is the green, and we're going to do this to the slot B for this. And then we can tap S and then click, and then we can call this roughness, add, like this. And if we add 0 to it, we're not going to be adding anything. So that'll give us the same exact results what we've got, but it'll give us again some additional controls to kind of play around with. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save for this, just like this. And one thing before I get out of here, I just wanted to make this very clear about if we change the color space on this, you can break your material, and just in case this happens to you, I want to make sure you can know how to fix this. So if we double click on the texture, and let's say we took this off sRGB and we save that, if we do that, it's going to make the texture quite a bit brighter. You can see it's going to break the material on us, and what we can do is just click this little eyeglass finder, and it'll find the texture, and we can plug it back in, and then everything should be okay. We could save that. You can see that turning on that sRGB off makes this image quite a bit brighter. So let's go back to this and just turn that option back on. We'll click this and then pipe it back in. I just deal with that a lot, and I just want to make sure if anything happened to you, if you broke things, you would know how to kind of get those options back. So I'm going to save this material. We're going to be able to save this texture. I'm going to right click on there and just say save. And then now what we're going to do, I'm going to just close all this down. We're going to go to the materials area, and I'm going to right click on the material and say create material instance. So we're creating a version of this material, and it's a little bit different because it's an instance. If we load it up, you can see what we've got going on here. We've got the crate. I'm going to move the light around on here. We might want to take this off of auto, make it negative 1.2 like we did before. And now we've got, remember those parameters that we made? We can click on these and we can change these at will, right? So if we want to change the metallic values and change something for that and make it more metallic, we have options for doing so for that. So let's put this at 1, and then the roughness, if we wanted to add some roughness in on this, we can change the values of this as well. So you might want to just give yourself some additional kind of controls to kind of tweak on this and make it look a little bit closer to the way that you're expecting for this. So go ahead and hit save for this. There's one last thing that I can show you with the material, and this could be just slightly a little bit dangerous to do this, but I'll show you anyways. Alright, here's where we can get a little bit dangerous. We're going to go ahead and open up the material that we were working on. Let's double click this and load this up. And what I want to show you is a technique called Fresnel. So Fresnel will actually allow us to add some kind of lightening to the edges of our model, and it detects the edges of the model through a Fresnel node. So we can just right click and say Fres like this, and if we take that, we can go and find this Fresnel utility that you see here, and we're going to build some parameters for this. We've got this exponent in and this base reflect fraction in and the normal. So we'll just hold on S, tap once, hold on S and tap again, and we can call this one, we'll call this exponent in like this, drag it into here, and we're going to take this one, we'll call this base reflection fraction. So just abbreviate that, that'll make things a little bit easier. I think a value on this one, we'll give a default value of 0.1, something really small like this. This exponent in, we'll give it a default value of 10, and like I said, we'll be able to tweak on some of this. Now we're going to right click and we'll find pixel normal world space like this. Okay, and then we'll plug this into the normal information. So this will give us, if we right click on here, we can say start previewing node. We can preview kind of what's going to be happening with this thing. What we're going to be doing is taking this and using this as a kind of like a mask for something. So we're going to multiply. So we're going to hold down M and click, and then we're going to drag this here. And then we're going to tap 3 and then click, and this will give us a vector 3 node that we've got. If you right click on here, if we do a search for constant, that's actually a constant 3 vector is what we just did a shortcut for. We can click and drag this out. We're going to right click on here and say convert to parameter, and we're going to call this Fres color like that. And we can just give it maybe a bluish tint, something like this, like that. And what we're going to plug this into is the emissive color. So we're going to click and drag this out into emissive like this. I'm going to right click and say stop previewing node, and immediately you can see some of the edges on here show up and they're blue, and they've got a little bit of sheen to them. We'll hit save for this. Now all the changes that we've made will get pushed into that material instance that we've made. And the material instance is already assigned to this crate, I believe, so let's take a look at that and make sure. So we don't. So I'm going to click this M crate and drag it into the material slot in here. That's if you want to do it on an individual basis, but if we wanted to make sure it happened on every one of the crates that we pull into the world, we would want to take that material, and we would want to take that instance and then drag it into this material slot here, just like this. Okay, so I'm going to hit save for this, close that down. Let's take a look at the material instance. I'm going to double click that, and we've got our new options that we can kind of play around with, and we can play around with the Fresnel color, this exponent in, and so this is going to give us the kind of the the thickness of how far that falls off. So if it gets closer to 0, you can see it's going to be a really kind of large effect across the whole entire thing. We can change the color and we can move the hue around on this. So maybe we want it to like an orangish kind of color, something like that. Hit OK, and again we can just middle mouse drag this on here, or sorry, left mouse drag right on here to kind of see what we got going on here. This base reflection fraction, this thing, if we drag it up a higher value, you can see what we've got going on here, and we can start to play around with that value and make that much smaller. So with these two different values, you can get some different effects on this thing. So I'm going to put this back down to 10. I'll put this down to a really kind of low number. We'll do like 0.125, something around in there. And now you can see that this is basically giving us some fake kind of rim light. Now because we are plugging this into emissive, it will always have this light on here. So if you want to make things go down to pure black for your lighting, that could end up being an issue for you that would not be good. So I'm just going to put this on movable for my light type. If we put the intensity down to 0, you can see how we are still going to get that this Fresnel to kind of show up on there. So again, that's something I was telling you might want to be just a little bit conscious about, right? I'm going to go ahead and right click and say save. The next thing I'm going to do is show you how we can easily replace all our proxy objects that we've got in the scene by just holding down shift and selecting them. Now if we've got all of our crates, we've got this, we can make a group out of this and call this crates, like this. And what we can do is within this area, you can right click and you can say select, and you can say select all descendants. So it's going to select everything you got. And if we go to our example of our mesh, if we select that here like this, we can right click over the selection that we've got and we can say replace with crate low. Well, we've got selected over in here in the content browser. So let's click that, and you can see it's going to easily and quickly replace all the proxy objects that we have with our actual new finished in-game asset. And I'm just going to tap 11 here, and so we can kind of just take a look and check out some of the different values. And this would be where I might want to just fine-tune things. So if we went to the materials and went to the material instance, what I'm seeing right now is that we've got a high amount of specularity kind of going on along the outer edge of this thing. So if we went to the roughness add and we started playing around with the values on there and we got it closer to 0, we could probably get rid of any of that sheen that we've got going on there. And then we could also take a look at the metallic multiply on there. And if we wanted those, you can see the dots are getting a little bit darker as we up that value on there. But so let's go ahead and make that 1, and I think that'll look pretty good for the metallic. I'm going to hit save for this. And if you want to play, you can hit Alt P and then just play directly into the level, and we can see the results that we got. So you can see that what we've learned is that we can create our own proxy objects. We can put these into UE4. We can go through the entire artistic pipeline of creating a final in-game asset, and then quickly replace all the proxy objects that we have in the entire world with our final in-game asset, and have the final look for our game.